Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Cyber Shadow. In the last part we finished off Chapter 2, now we're in Chapter 3, Mecha City Ruins. And you might be able to tell just based off that little world map thing there, Chapter 3 on is where the game's levels tend to get a little bit more on the lengthy side. And I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the last part, at the end of Part 1, but at the end of most levels you're gonna find one of these little green consoles. They are teleport points that allow you to revisit prior stages now that you have more power-ups. I'm going to be saving on doing that until, by and large, right before the end of the game, though, as I would like to have all the major power-ups before I go back to the earlier levels. Plus, sometimes you need very endgame stuff to get past doors anyway, so, No, I'm going to get it all done at once rather than just doing multiple trips. Due to the length, though, Mecha City has a couple of core mechanics, the first one being these collapsing platforms as well as falling acid. The collapsing platforms seem like they might be a threat, but honestly they're really not, because Shadow's jump arc is wide enough that you can make a lot of jumps that you think you might not be able to if this was a lot of other types of games, honestly. Shadow's jump overall definitely focuses more on range than height, for now at least. Now that checkpoint there is interesting. That's the first one you can buy a sub-weapon called the Swag Blade, which is meant to be a send-up to the Windmill Shurikens from the old Ninja Gaidens. The ones that when you jumped, you could keep it going and just have it spin all over you. But they make the spinning part of the mechanic because it's always tethered to you, and you can attack it to just send it into enemies. If anyone finds this, that madman Progen killed one of our clan in an experiment. All that remains of our friend's essence was trapped in this container. My mission to retrieve it was successful, but if I should fail, please see to it that it reaches the master. That makes the rest of these pickups potentially being people's essence kind of depressing, but oh well, moving on. My training isn't even complete, yet here I lie, broken. Will my essence travel home to the ethos, or dissipate into nothingness? I'm out of supplies, so I'll find out soon enough. Have you got a pretty good eye for this game's tone so far? Because that kind of continues to be what it's like overall. This is not a very happy game, despite having some really happy-sounding music in some cases, and honestly some really funny Easter eggs as we'll see throughout. Either way, going back to the Swag Blade. The Swag Blade is grossly effective as a weapon, because not only does it just extend your range just far beyond what Shadow can do even outside of the Shurikens normally, but if memory serves at least, its damage if you use your sword against the blade to swing it into an enemy directly is greater than the sword swing you have for now itself, so it's a better way to do damage overall. The bigger problem in that regard would be it's technically a slower rate of fire compared to your main sword, but if you just, like, stand in front of an enemy and swing your sword while also hitting the Swag Blade, you're gonna do some pretty good damage. I don't think there's really an unuseful sub-weapon you can get from checkpoints in the game. There's only really one or two I kind of consider and honestly, one of them is the Blade Extend, if only because you have better ways to work around your range down the line to begin with. That's probably why, now that I think about it, it's mostly in the early game checkpoints rather than the later game ones. Later game ones tend to give you more long-range options in general, or shieldy type stuff. So, at the end of last part, we got ourselves the Rising Fire ability. And this is the first time I can directly talk about this. Your SP count doesn't prevent you from using your special attacks, it just prevents them from being special, so to speak. Because the Rising Fire, you press down the attack button, you swing your blade upwards, and you fire 3 flames off at slightly weird angles. Those flames are pretty good for reaching high up things to begin with, like switches like the one we hit a moment ago. But if you have no SP, you can still press down the attack button, and you'll still swing your blade upwards, you just won't fire out the fire. So in the case there's an enemy directly above you and you don't want to try to jump to hit them, honestly, it's a pretty good idea to use that even if you don't have the SP for it. Notably, you can, I believe, still also throw something out if you don't have SP for the Shuriken, but it's like a weak piece of essence that fizzles out before it can become a damageable circumstance kind of deal. Not really an attack, more so just a, oh, you're out animation for that one at the least. Also, because I hit that switch to lower those platforms, I'm coming down here to restore my HP, because why not? This isn't a deathless playthrough, but I'm still trying not to die a lot, you know? Their leader controls a weapon high in the clouds. Anywhere into the open sky is unsafe. I must stay hidden indoors. That's directly talking about a mechanic we're going to see in a moment, so I'll talk about it then, but that is going to be the main mechanic for this level. But we do have to be careful here because there's some surprisingly damaging enemies here. The mines that explode in certain directions when you get too close is one thing. You can use a shuriken to detonate them ahead of time, though. But the red robots that pick up stuff and throw them are surprisingly high in damage. If you get hit by something they throw, I think that does like 2 damage compared to most other things in this point in the game's 1. So be careful. So right here, we're seeing the earliest versions of that mechanic I was talking about a moment ago. Whenever you're in an open sky area, a reticle's going to try to hit you. Attention all civilians, this is an automated transmission. The city and surrounding islands have been secured with a safety perimeter. Please evacuate via train transit. Yeah, at least they had some escape plan. The reticles then become a gigantic laser that just beams down and makes that entire area where the reticle was marking a active hitbox, so you need to be careful of it. Early on in the stage, it just hits specific tiles the moment you get near them, but the further you get into the stage, the more active it is in aiming at you. But we want to actually grab ourselves a swag blade here because we're coming up on this stage's mini-boss. That bigger lantern on top there, by the way, just contains more essence. Here we have the, I think it's called like the armored tank or something. This thing's made up of several pieces that can fire at you, namely like 3 or 4 different mini cannons. The main thing we need to attack is the cap on top of the main cannon, though, that fires out the homing projectiles that split into 2 when they get too close to you. Notably, and one of the harder achievements in the game to get, there is an achievement for this fight for beating it without destroying any of the side cannons. But when there's one of those right next to the main core, that's kind of hard to do. After you destroy the cap, though, the main core of the tank itself becomes revealed, and after you attack that a little bit, the mini-boss is done, and you get a free health up for beating that like you do for a lot of the game's mini-bosses. The swag blade alone, honestly, kind of makes me wish some of the checkpoints in the game had options for items you could purchase, in the case they made enough essence for you to get multiple, so that you could, say, always have a swag blade on hand, or if you wanted to go for a more defensive playstyle. But the unfortunate part of that is, every checkpoint in the game has a set item at all times. My friends are captive, neither alive nor dead, in the void between here and the ethos. I must keep running, or I'll share their fate. Bad news, I think they shared their fate. Whoops. Not gonna lie, you don't really get to see them a lot in detail in the actual game, but the robot designs for this game are honestly really good. They're the right level of, like, uniform to suggest it being like a series, but they all have a lot of good detail on them. In general, this game's character design and enemy design is really good, even if you don't get to see a lot of it up close in detail. This is the kind of game I would have loved to see, like, an art book for, to see, like, the concept art for a lot of the enemies, but I doubt that'll ever happen, honestly. Before we head on, we actually want to break this wall over here to find ourselves an SP up. But we got this weird little enemy here who actually hooks onto the SP up and uses it to, I think, consistently restore its health? So you want to grab the SP up first and then attack the enemy, weirdly. Kind of the opposite of how those kind of rooms tend to work. Also, mentally, that just always reminds me of those 2 specific expansions in Metroid Fusion. I think it's a missile tank and an energy tank in 2 specific areas that are actually enemies in disguise, and the actual version of those items are slightly behind them. I don't know why that's what I get reminded of, but it is. Something I really do appreciate about this game, though, with how it works with its mini-bosses and all of its enemy rushes, the game does a good job at making your power scaling feel comfortable. Like, you can feel like a complete badass just swiping through enemies even this early in the game because of how little health they are, but they do a good job making the mini-bosses and enemy healths progress to the point where if you feel like you're getting too weak, the next power-up to make that a little bit safer, or an item that will be in a checkpoint to help you with that, is generally right nearby. Speaking of items, though, they're not always just gotten through checkpoints. Sometimes they're hidden in the level design. And this is another one of my favorites. This is a shield that actively acts as a shield for projectiles in front of you, but if you attack it when it's at full charge, it becomes a projectile that travels forward. The trains have stopped. No one else is getting out. Looks like it's the end for us all. You don't get this one too often in the game, but its projectile, like, completely passes through landscapes and other projectiles, so it's really good for hitting enemies from a distance. This is one I wish there were more opportunities to get throughout the game because I do find it to just be one of my favorites. It does technically get a little bit replaced down the line by a certain power, but we'll talk about that in a couple of parts at the current going rate that I forget the progression already, even though I edited the entire game last night. Essence in this game is a little weird when it comes to collecting it, though, because, yeah, you don't get a lot at any point in time. I think the most you can get from a single pickup is 2. But it also respawns indefinitely. Like, there's usually a Essence lantern right next to a checkpoint, and you can just get that after you die infinitely. Whoever's controlling the aerial weapon stalks his prey from the top of this building. Wherever he gazes, the weapon strikes. No one can dodge it. Well, I've done kind of a poor job about that thus far, but you can completely dodge it in the game. It's honestly really easy. Just lead it somewhere first. But yeah, like, even right here, if you die at this boss fight, you can just infinitely get that essence there and potentially get enough essence to power up that checkpoint more. With that said, time for the Chapter 3 boss fight. This is the Biohunter. He starts off flying. He's going to be at the roughly 4/5 mark of the screen at any point in time, and fire his cannon at you a couple of different ways. He'll always send projectiles behind him when he's flying in case that you're using it as a blind spot, and whenever he progresses and charges across the screen, he's going to fire some mines at a bit of a staggered pattern to potentially hit you on the way across. But when he's firing his gun, he'll either fire it and then leave, or land and then fire it a couple of different ways, or swing his cannon down like a sword that can be pretty easily dodged because it's a relatively slow attack. There is notably an achievement in this fight for beating him by only using your sword, though, so be careful. At about the halfway point, though, he destroys the platform and you get trapped in a smaller arena, and now this fight's entirely close range. He's got his sword and he's going to do it one of 2 ways. A jump and then a 1-2 strike, or a jump and a 1 strike. But either way, at the last part of his sword attack, he gets it stuck in the ground, and that's where he's open for more attack. On a first playthrough, this fight I found really hard, but now that I understand the pattern, it's honestly one of those more approachable boss fights in the game. And for beating that, I guess we're about to get another power-up. Dr. Projan steals our powers to augment his own. He seeks access to the secret safeguarded by our clan, the Ethos. Look for a shrine to help you remember. Alright, buddy. But we get one of my favorite power-ups in the game here. This is the, I think it's the down strike is what it's called? Air strike. You press down and then you attack in midair and you do a giant downward stab like Link from Zelda 2, only it carries momentum and it can destroy platforms. If you have SP for it, you also get surrounded by fire and cause an explosion upon impact. And what the game doesn't tell you for a large part of its run as well, you can use this to sort of pogo like Scrooge and DuckTales. If you hit it from one enemy to another one, you can just keep a chain going and just get really high up in the air doing sort of just an infinite pogo jump. Not that there's many opportunities in the game to do that, but we want to come down here, air striking these enemies along the way to do sort of the thing I just talked about, to find an HP upgrade and, pizza boxes, a skateboard, a jukebox, and a TV in the sewers. I wonder if this is referencing something from the 80s and 90s that's still going on today. That new Mutant Mayhem movie looks kind of fun. It is kind of weird that this game has such a serious tone in its plot, but the Easter eggs are just very lighthearted in that regard. It does create some whiplash, but it's overall harmless, I find. Here, next to the reactor, is where our master's treatments took place. The part of the facility that was below ground seems to be intact. I must investigate. Well, you tried your best, buddy. This part of the game's a little bit different for a reason I'll talk about in a moment. I feel the essence of the fallen crying out in desperation. A plea from those prevented from passing on, stranded between life and death. A call to end their exploitation, to let them die. So, you might notice there's an HP upgrade right there, but we can't grab it because we need the next power-up to do that. We need to find that power-up in order to progress, even. This is technically not Chapter 3 anymore, but it's not quite Chapter 4 either. At least I don't think it's Chapter 3 technically, because we're after the boss fight, but we're not quite at the point where we see the Chapter 4 intro cinematic sort of deal. But we want to come into this cave because whenever there's a mysterious cave in a game like this, that means there's usually some sort of power-up. Ooh, mysterious green monkey statue. Hello. Let's meditate on this. Welcome to the Ethos. Welcome. Your fate keeps pulling you back into the eternal ethos. But you'll belong neither here nor there until your mission is complete.
Hoo-hoo! Welcome! Your sensitivity to essence has guided you here. Your gift is not unlike our master's. You'll have to wield it well if we're to restore balance.
This is a part of the game where you should talk to everyone twice, because you do get an extra line, I believe. I just forget to do that until later on, like I mentioned earlier. Those in our clan with the most powerful connection to the essence are also most susceptible to it. Carried away by emotion, that was the downfall of our friend in red. Wonder who they're talking about there. Now, I find that jump really weird. To get up here is weirdly tight. Without the Master and the Elementals, we might not have the strength to keep order. We're trying our best. Through here is where our trainees are challenged. You remember, right? Maybe you can show them how it's done? And now we have to do a fun little mini-game. Now, I've tried 100 times, and the cryptic hints sure aren't helping. But I'll never give up. Reaching the top before that monkey, nearly impossible. Realize there's nothing to hold on to. Let go and the world will carry you. I have yet to fully grasp the meaning of this. We have to race this monkey up to the top of this room. It does pause at some point, so it's not exactly hard, but if you drop down to the bottom, you gotta restart. You can make it just by jumping, I believe, but the jumps get pretty tight, so what I recommend doing is a thing I talked about a moment ago. Use the airstrike as sort of an extra jump to get over these platforms quicker. It also allows you to make some kind of tighter jumps otherwise. This is one of the few places in the game you can really take advantage of this, so use it well. Like, you can use it right there to just completely skip that one platform and all that. The airstrike's hitbox is pretty forgiving. As long as, like, the lower half of Shadow's body, when you're doing a touch of something, it's gonna work. And here we got ourselves a new power-up. I think you might be able to talk to the monkey spirit. I'm actually not sure. We got the wall slide. We can now slide on walls. It is notably a wall slide. It is like Mega Man X's wall cling, in that you will slowly slide down the walls. You'll never be able to just permanently cling onto them. But this allows us to climb up a single wall, allowing us not only grab that HP upgrade we saw a few moments ago, but access the next chapter proper. I told my partner to keep going while I stayed behind. Hopefully I can still escape. Good thing we're trained in demolitions. Machines are at the entrance. I need to hurry. Sorry to completely undo your work here, buddy. Whoops. So, our main goal here is to climb up here to get this HP upgrade, yes, but the top of this crane is where the chapter entrance is for Chapter 4, so we need to come up here anyway. And here we are. Is our master truly gone? I never sensed her passage to the Ethos, and I can't feel her presence anywhere in Mecha City. Shadow must have seen what happened. Even during our missions, he never took his eyes off this place. Notably, by the way, that door is right above the previous teleporter we saw, in case you wanted to go back to prior chapters at this point for some reason. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in Part 4, we tackled Chapter 4, one of the longer chapters in the game now I think about it. See you guys then.